Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Once again, this is Sarah Shahzad. Welcome to CxO TV, where innovation meets ideas for growth via our knowledge sharing platform, CxO Global Forum. Joining us today is Saqib Majeed, Managing Partner at Majeed and Partners, Advocates and Counselors at Law. Very good evening, Saqib Saab. How are you today?
Thank you, Sarah, and good evening to you, and thank you for having me on the show.
Thank you very much for taking out your valuable time for us and be a part of our show. So, Saqib Saab, tell us about your journey in the legal field for almost about 2 decades.
Sarah, I started my legal career back in 2002. My areas of practice are corporate, commercial, banking, regulatory, and public procurement.
Right.
Over the years, I have done a mix of both transactional and litigation work. I had the opportunity to work on the transaction that resulted in the biggest foreign investment in the history of Pakistan. On litigation side, I had advised on a commercial dispute that eventually resulted in the second largest CxO award ever issued. Unfortunately, it involved the government of Pakistan.
Okay.
I am the managing partner of Majeed and Partners. It's a boutique full service law firm. We are based in Lahore, but we provide services across Pakistan as well as in more than 100 countries around the world through our partner firms.
Right. That's great. So, can you tell us about Terralax?
Trail X, as I mentioned that we provide legal services outside Pakistan through our partner firms. Basically, Trail X. It's a international network of law firms which has members across I think in more than 104 countries across the globe. It has more than 20,000 lawyers and who are providing specialized services in their respective local jurisdictions. Now,
Right.
TRLX, the membership of TRLX, it's by invitation only. And each prospective member has to go through basically a very rigorous vetting process. And once that process is complete, you are offered a membership of the network, and then you have the basically I would say you basically have the luxury to serve your clients in other jurisdictions through other TRLX member firms, which are by any means leaders in their respective jurisdictions.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right. So, Saqib Saab, as you know that we are in digitization era. So, what legislation would you recommend for the digital world and IT sector, which doesn't exist so far?
Uh, well, Basically, Sarah, it's not one. To begin with, uh, the main blood of digital world is data,
True.
and there must be an enabling legal regime where you can basically have access to data, you can freely process data, and you can basically disclose data to others in a lawful manner, in a lawful manner.
Mhm.
Unfortunately, in Pakistan, we don't have a formal or a proper data protection legislation. Um, Basically, you see, whenever you do a business with someone, they would know if you are processing some data. You basically have the legal basis to do that. In Pakistan, we are operating in a gray space. Like our courts, they have in a number of judgments said that the data, it's a property of the individuals to which it belongs, and it cannot be used without its that individual's permission. And
Exactly.
how and but globally there are a number of other lawful grounds on the basis of which you can basically process data. Um, and so that's why we are operating, unless our businesses have specific consent of the subject, we are at a risk of having claims against us regarding unauthorized use of data. Now,
True.
the second most important thing for IT sector or the digital world would be to protect itself from cyber attacks and things like that.
Exactly.
Now, in Pakistan, we do have, in that context, a legislation which basically prohibits and which criminalizes unauthorized access to your systems or the information contained in that. And it's a protection of it's a Prevention of Electronic Crimes Act 2016.
Right.
The problem is that if you are operating in Pakistan and someone from, say, Balkan region, it hacks your system and it basically it steals your data, or it's somehow take control of your system and ask for ransom. uh, yes, it would be a breach and it would be a criminal offense under Pakistani law. The question would be, how would you enforce that law? Because you are sitting in Pakistan, your government, it has a jurisdiction only over the territories of Pakistan. How would you basically you arrest the culprit and investigate it? How would you obtain the evidence? So that's the other thing, that you don't have basically a legal mechanism to protect you from cyber attacks. The recent example of FBR's hacking and is that prior to that, the certain banks they had faced those attacks. So there must be a proper comprehensive legal regime which should protect businesses operating in Pakistan from these type of phenomena. The government last year, they had introduced a legislation basically calling for and receiving and providing mutual legal assistance to governments in other countries. But to my information, there is not a single mutual legal assistance treaty in criminal matters that has been signed between the government of Pakistan or any other country so far.
Okay.
That is the second thing. And the third issue, IT, when you talk about IT or you talk about the digital world, the first word which comes to your mind is softwares and
True.
intellectual property. A software, it's an intellectual property, it could be an innovative idea. But unfortunately, there is no clear mechanism in Pakistan for protecting your idea in a software. A software itself, you can register it as as a copyright, just like a novel or something. But the idea which is behind that software, you cannot protect it in Pakistan.
True.
So, in other countries, the governments or their legislatures, they have allowed either directly the grant of patents in respect of softwares, or they have basically allowed the grant of patents in respect of softwares coupled with together with the hardware. But
Right.
unfortunately, in Pakistan, it's still a gray area. We don't know if the intellectual property organization would allow, at least to my information, so far they have not allowed the grant of patents in softwares. So that's another important piece of legislation that should be there. And finally, I would also mention about a proper comprehensive regulatory regime regarding e-commerce.
Right.
Right now, we don't have a proper e-commerce regime, in particular from the point of view of the consumers or the customers. But it basically, in my view, the absence of a proper regulatory regime, it would also affect the growth of e-commerce sector, because if there is no certainty for the entities which are operating in
True.
e-commerce space as to what would apply to them, they would be hesitant to come into the market and to basically invest in that market. So basically,
True.
these are the, I think, four areas which, in my mind, it should be the government and the legislatures. Most importantly, they should enact proper laws our IT sector to grow.
आपको लगता है कि जैसे जैसे जो है वो नई चीजें आ रही हैं लाइक वी हैव सीन सो मेनी लाइक इफ यू टॉक अबाउट ई-कॉमर्स एंड मेनी अदर प्लेटफॉर्म्स तो इवॉल्व कर रहा है हमारी जो लीगल प्लानिंग्स और लॉज हैं वो साथ साथ इसके इवॉल्व करें टेक्नोलॉजी के साथ साथ
Definitely, Ji, and I think this is one of the reason why our regulators, they are slow in responding to innovation, because
राइट
unfortunately right now we the laws we have, these are outdated laws. They
ट्रू
were meant for 30, 40 or 50 years ago era.
ट्रू
They do not cater for today's changing
व्हाट इट इज
requirements.
नीड
Yeah, but having said this, we what we are seeing is that the some of the regulators, I would say, and most notably the Securities and Exchange Commission of Pakistan and the State Bank of Pakistan, they are proactively bringing regulatory regimes for new businesses based on technology, like State Bank of Pakistan. The process started back in 2002, I would say, with the with the enactment of Electronic Transactions Ordinance, and then there was another legislation for payment systems in 2007. But the process, it really it was paced up back in 2019, and we have seen a number of measures taken by the State Bank of Pakistan uh, for enabling innovation in the financial sector, and also by the Securities and Exchange Commission of Pakistan, in the form of they had this concept of regulatory sandbox, where you can test new technologies, and based on the outcome of those testing, the regulator would eventually bring some regulatory bring rules or regulations enabling these type of transactions or the business models, as well as also protecting the interest of their consumers in the local
राइट
market.
Right. So you're saying that the data protection laws are not sufficient yet to combat cybersecurity threats in Pakistan. We still need to work on it.
Well, yes, definitely. Basically, these are two different. I must say these are two different. There are two different issues here. The one issue is the protection of data of your citizens, I would say, and the associated issue is allowing businesses to use the data of citizens without any fear of unlawful processing. And the third issue, I would say, or the second issue, the separate issue would be to basically protect your businesses from data breaches in the form of cyber attacks or stuff like that. Yes, we need to do a lot of more work on both fronts. On as regards the cyber security issue or cyber breaches, what we have a legal regime in place. All the government has to do is to basically conclude mutual legal assistance treaties with the other countries, so that if any incident happens in Pakistan which has connections outside the territory of Pakistan, we are able to chase the culprits in the relevant jurisdiction. We are able to collect the evidence from there. So this is one thing. And as regards the personal data is concerned, it's quite interesting. We are trying to bring personal data protection legislation in Pakistan. I think since last 17 years. I
Right.
remember there was a draft legislation issued by the government of Pakistan back in 2004 or 2005. Then there was a draft data protection, personal data protection act in 2018. Then in 2020 came another draft legislation. And
Right.
I understand that back in August this year, they issued another draft of the personal data protection legislation that may be enacted in Pakistan. Now, that legislation, in my view, will do more bad than any good for our businesses and for our citizens, because this legislation is, to some extent, it's based on European Union's the General Data Protection Regulation.
Right.
It's a industry benchmark. But what they have done is that they have taken bits and pieces from that comprehensive framework and basically trying to use that, and it doesn't make any sense. It does not have all the necessary elements which must be there for a proper personal data protection regime to operate. So I don't know. The draft is still open for public consultation, but the way the government has been proceeding in this matter so far, it appears like unlikely that we will have a proper comprehensive data protection legislation, which would basically allow our businesses to flourish further. And let me quote you one example from that legislation. It's
Sure.
that globally, when you do it's a known phenomena that businesses, for cost effectiveness, they can transfer data across jurisdictions. So
True.
uh, wherever they would find that they can reduce their cost, they would do the processing of data outside that jurisdiction. Now, in our basically draft legislation, what they have said, that they have identified or they have categorized certain personal data which the companies would be obliged to keep in Pakistan and to process
Right.
in Pakistan. Now, and when I'm saying data, it will be very basic data, the financial information about their customers. Now, if for instance there is a fintech company who need to store and process a large amount of data, and they find that there is an entity in US which, or in Europe, which can provide these services at very competitive rates, they won't be allowed to transfer that data outside Pakistan, which would basically increase their cost. So there are
Right.
measures like that which would basically restrain our businesses from growing further, and it would basically add to their existing cost.
Exactly. Exactly. So, what do you say about the banking and fintechs? They're well protected in the legal framework because I
Bank,
believe State Bank uh, has put up the strict obligations on banks, and it's really working hard on it.
yes. Sir, I must say that Pakistan have done a lot of progress when it comes to fintechs and open banking measures. Basically, as I mentioned earlier, we have two regulators in this sphere. One is State Bank of Pakistan, the other one is Securities and Exchange Commission of Pakistan. State Bank of Pakistan basically regulates the conventional banks, or we in legal term we call them banking companies. Then they regulate it regulates microfinance banks, electronic money institutions, then the payment system operators and payment system providers, so on and so forth. And the SECP basically it regulates non-banking finance companies, insurance companies, mudarbas, and security market. So in recent past, SECP has issued a proper regulatory regime for these institutions like EMIs and payment system operators and payment system providers, and it has issued a number of licenses to these entities, and they are working in a proper regulatory framework. State Bank of Pakistan also issued the instant payment system, RAS, and it's a big step. It would promote further innovation. And recently, this year, I think they also basically directed the conventional banks to enable interbank fund transfer with all the participants in State Bank's payment system. So,
Right.
and these entities, they are operating, they have their proper licenses. They are answerable to State Bank of Pakistan, and there are basically mechanisms in which if someone uses the services of these companies and if they have any complaint, they can approach the regulator.
Right.
Likewise, SECP's the most important step they had taken was this regulatory sandbox box. It's a I would say very unique step taken by them. A few regulators in the world they are operating these regulatory sandboxes. Um and then they also made certain changes in our company law to basically create an enabling environment for fintech companies and for promoting open banking. Uh, but I personally feel that the regulatory response to innovation in Pakistan is it's quite slow, and to some extent it is because the regulators are basically burdened to protect the consumer interest. So they must be cautious whenever there is a new technology, there is a new idea. They must study it properly and then basically allow it to happen or to progress.
Right.
The second reason for this slow regulatory response, it's not basically we can't attribute it to the regulator. It's basically our legislative barriers. I would call it that
Okay.
our laws they don't allow certain innovative business ideas to prosper or to be implemented. So there it basically the blame goes to the our regulators, not sorry, not the regulators. It goes to our legislators who have to enact laws, because if there is no
True.
enabling legislation, our regulators
Exactly.
they can't do anything. They cannot go beyond the legal framework.
Exactly. Exactly. That's very
Yeah,
right.
and let me again let me give you an example. Uh,
Sure.
Last year, the government of Pakistan they amended the Companies Act basically to create an enabling environment for venture capital investment in our tech startups. The ordinance eventually lapsed, and it subsequently the government presented a bill in the National Assembly. That bill was passed by the National Assembly, I think, back in June this year, and then it was presented before the upper house of our parliament, the Senate. Until such time the Senate does not approve it, it cannot be transformed into a law. And whatever the measures were proposed in the bill, they can't be implemented. So since June, and now we are about to start in November, this draft legislation or the bill has not been cleared or assented to or passed by the Senate, with the result that everything is basically at a standstill. So to answer your question, yes, there is a proper legal framework for fintech and open banking entities operating in these spheres. The day by day, it is you see, these are new technologies. And as I mentioned, that our existing laws do not cater for these technologies.
True.
But I feel that as the time passes, there would be more regulatory measures which would enable these type of businesses, as well as the measures which would protect the consumer interest in response to allowing these businesses to operate.
True, true, true. Very well said, Saqib Saab. So, what's the future prospects of foreign law degree versus local? That's the question I always wanted to ask.
Now, in answer to this question, a very famous quote comes to my mind. You must have heard of के degree degree होती है.
True.
One of our chief ministers, he used to say that some time ago. But joking apart, uh, each has its own benefits and its own drawbacks. Uh,
Hmm.
when you talk about the local law degree, uh, the downside for those who go for a foreign law degree is that they would study the laws, and which a major part of which would consist of the procedures which would be applicable in the relevant jurisdiction. If someone is doing an external program here in Pakistan, where the curriculum is based on the UK legal system, or someone goes to UK and studies there. So they would learn the laws and procedures which are applicable in that market or in that jurisdiction. They would not be familiar with the Pakistani laws,
Local
and
system of
yeah,
Pakistan,
yeah,
how it
exactly.
works.
Like, yeah, exactly. Like a basic skill which a lawyer must have, he must be familiar with the court procedures. When you go for a local for a local legal degree, they teach you all these procedures. These are in our company law. They are in our civil procedure code. They are in our criminal procedure code. Though they are outdated laws, but those are the laws which are enforced by our courts. So
True.
when you come back after getting a foreign degree, you are as in the same position as if you are a first year law student.
You're a
You would have to
fresh.
learn that all again, and basically, that's the drawback of having a foreign degree.
Foreign
uh,
degree.
and on the other hand, as I mentioned, that we have outdated laws, our procedures are outdated. So if you go for a local degree, obviously you would not be familiar with what is going on in more developed jurisdictions. What are the new concepts which have been implemented in response to new business ideas or technologies? Because basically laws are to regulate societies, and if the society is advancing, the law must also advance correspondingly. But unfortunately, our laws are outdated, so that's a downside in having a local degree. But personally, I would prefer a local degree at the start of my legal career.
Correct.
And once
Correct.
I have done the degree, I have worked in the local market for 1 or 2 years, and I am familiar with how the things work locally. After that, I would prefer to go for further specialization or to obtain a foreign qualification, so that I am in a position to basically compare what is in our legal system and what is the position in the more advanced legal systems, and then we would be able to basically contribute to the betterment of our own system.
ट्रू वेरी राइट बहुत आपसे हमें आज चीज़ें पता चली सीखने को मिला एंड आई एम श्योर कि व्यूअर्स ने बहुत सारी चीज़ें क्लियरली अंडरस्टैंड की आज lastly I would like to ask that what utility you see being a part of CxO Global Forum.
Well, I think I'm very, very, very optimistic. I joined this forum recently, and basically so that I can share my knowledge, because I have a peculiar legal expertise, and but the people who are or other members in the forum, they every one of them, they are master in their own skills. So
Yes.
I think CxO Forum, it provides a very good platform for us to exchange ideas, and most importantly, it would provide an opportunity to the younger people who are new in business, to basically come and learn from the people who have more experience in their relevant fields, and who have expert knowledge in their relevant fields.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Saqib Saab. Hopefully, inshallah, we'll see you again in one of our shows. And thank you very much for your valuable time for us.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you for having me here again.
Allah Hafiz.